Picture this. You're digging through ancient ruins, brushing off centuries of dust, like you're in a knockoff Indiana Jones reboot, when suddenly you find a humble clay jar. Not golden, not glowing, not even cursed. Just beige. Boring. Until you look inside and go, wait, is this thing wired? Because this isn't just your average Mesopotamian Tupperware. This little jar, found near Baghdad in 1938, contains a copper tube, an iron rod, and bitumen sealant, which, if your brain has ever seen a ninth-grade science fair, kind of screams primitive battery. Like actual battery, one that makes electricity, one that predates Benjamin Franklin's kite-flying electric picnic by about 1,800 years. Historians call it the Baghdad Battery, which honestly sounds like a crime thriller or a heavy metal band. Of course, the mainstream academic response is a deeply committed because admitting ancient people had batteries is like saying your grandma had Wi-Fi in 1942. But still, there it is, sitting in a museum display case with a label that basically shrugs and says, "Function unknown," which for archaeology is just a polite way of saying, we have no idea, but we're deeply uncomfortable with where this might go. Alright, so let's say, just for funsies, that the Baghdad Battery was actually used to generate electricity. Cue the next logical question. What would a bunch of Parthian-era tinkerers actually do with 0.5 volts of power? Well, one of the leading theories is electroplating. Yep, fancy word, simple idea. Coating one metal with another using electricity. Think ancient bling powered by low-voltage science magic. The theory goes that people might have used this battery jar to zap a thin layer of silver or gold onto trinkets, statues, or the ancient equivalent of a limited edition Funko Pop. Because nothing says divine ruler like gold-plated eyebrows. And yes, some artifacts from the region do look suspiciously smooth and shimmery, like someone figured out how to evenly coat metal without modern tech. That's the aha moment for the electroplating crowd. Until the skeptics step in like hall monitors at a middle school dance and go, actually, we've never found electroplating equipment nearby. Wump, wump. Also, minor problem. There are no instruction manuals, no drawings, no ancient Mesopotamian TikTok influencer showing how to DIY gold your bronze with lemon juice and a divine spark, just a jar, with some corrosion, and a lot of questions. But hey, maybe ancient people were just really into mysterious vibes, or maybe they figured out electricity and said, you know what? Let's not tell anyone. Let's bury it in the sand for the future weirdos. Either way, you're left with the ancient equivalent of, I swear this worked before you got here. Okay, but what if they didn't use it to bling out ceremonial duck figurines? What if the Baghdad Battery was part of some ancient health and wellness routine? You know, pre-goop, pre-crystals, pre-align your chakras with magnet socks. Just straight-up electric therapy in the year 200 BCE. One theory suggests that people used it for medical or religious purposes. Which, yes, sounds like a mad lib until you think about it. Imagine you're a priest-healer type in the Parthian Empire and you zap someone lightly on the skin with this thing. They feel a tingle, their muscles twitch. You look them dead in the eye and say, the gods have entered your blood. Boom, instant miracle. Or maybe it was the world's first TENS unit. Your back hurts from dragging clay bricks all day. Here, try this jar. Just don't lick the copper end unless you're ready to meet your ancestors. The theory goes that early civilizations might have interpreted mild electric shocks as mystical or divine. Honestly, it checks out. We still freak out over static electricity like it's a message from the Matrix. Now imagine feeling it for the first time without understanding science. That's not weird tingle. That's full-on Zeus is in the room. Still, there's zero documentation. No scroll titled How to Electrify Your Enemies for religious credibility. Just a lot of interpretive guesswork and a tiny clay jar that may or may not have been the world's earliest taser, or placebo with a buzz. If this was ancient medicine, it was either revolutionary or the Parthian version of rubbing onions on your feet to cure anxiety. Hard to say. Ah yes, the academic killjoys, the people who look at the Baghdad Battery and say, relax, it's a jar, a glorified cup, a Bronze Age IKEA return item. This theory, the most conservative of the bunch, argues that the battery is, brace yourself, not a battery at all. That all the parts inside, the copper, the iron, the bitumen, were just coincidentally assembled like the world's most misleading Lego set. According to this view, the jar could have been used to store scrolls, sacred relics, magic beans, or, who knows, ancient pickles. And to be fair, archaeologists do have a point. There's no inscription that says, Step 1, add lemon juice. Step 2, shock your cousin. Step 3, profit. There's no wiring diagram, no electrode safety warnings, and no Parthian dude with a YouTube channel titled Electro Crafts with Hammurabi 420. So yes, maybe the jar was just a jar. Maybe we're the problem. Maybe we're just so desperate for ancient sci-fi that we see a couple of corroded metals and scream, Ancient Tesla, like we're in some kind of historically confused episode of Ancient Aliens. But here's the thing. You don't just accidentally construct a working galvanic cell. You don't accidentally invent something that makes electricity when filled with grape juice. If that's a coincidence, it's the most productive mistake since the invention of penicillin, or Pop-Tarts. So yeah, the just a jar theory is safe. It's neat. It's very tidy, but it's also kind of boring. And we, dear viewer, do not come to archaeology for boring. We come for the mystery, the wild theories, and the vague possibility that some ancient engineer made a light bulb 1,800 years before Edison, and then just didn't tell anyone. Let's play a game. Imagine you're an archaeologist 2,000 years in the future. Earth is a hot mess. Everything's collapsed. Civilization is basically a museum gift shop with no context. You're digging through what used to be a kitchen drawer and, bam, you find an AA battery. Now here's the kicker. You have no idea what it is. No flashlights, no TV remotes, no Furby that haunts your childhood. Just a tiny metal cylinder with weird markings and some suspicious ooze leaking out the side. Would you know it creates power? Would you lick it and think it's a health supplement? Would you assume it was used in religious rituals where people chant AA AA around a fire? This, friends, is exactly how we're looking at the Baghdad Battery. We're the clueless future archaeologists. We have no instruction manual. We're missing the device it powered, if there even was one. We just found the AA battery in the desert and went, huh, neat. Anyway, back to pottery shards. The point is, context matters. A lot. The Baghdad Battery could be the ancient equivalent of pulling out just the charger, but not the phone. Or like finding a steering wheel in a tomb and going, ah yes, a ritual bread-flattening tool. Without knowing the rest of the setup, we're left squinting at copper and iron and guessing like it's an SAT question written by aliens. So maybe, just maybe, the Parthians had more figured out than we give them credit for. Or maybe someone just built the world's most confusing container. Either way, it's a reminder that technology without context is like IKEA furniture without the little Allen key. Confusing, mildly dangerous, and probably missing a screw. Let's be honest. Baghdad Battery isn't the only ancient artifact that makes historians sweat and conspiracy theorists foam at the mouth. Oh no, it's part of a secret club of weird ancient tech, aka the things that shouldn't exist but somehow do. Members include the Antikythera mechanism, aka the world's first analog computer, pulled out of a Greek shipwreck looking like a steampunk fever dream. The Dendera light, a strange Egyptian wall relief that, if you squint hard enough and ignore everything Egyptologists say, looks suspiciously like a giant light bulb plugged into a lotus flower. The pyramid's inner tunnels, lit without soot or burn marks. Mysterious. Maybe candles, maybe mirrors, or maybe a glowing Baghdad battery tucked into someone's utility tunic. If you're seeing a pattern, it's this. Ancient civilizations may have been way more clever than our textbooks gave them credit for. We like to imagine history as a clean ladder. Fire, wheel, farming, writing, electricity, TikTok. But the reality might be less ladder and more someone built an elevator, it broke, and then we forgot elevators existed for 1,000 years. It's like discovering your great-great-grandma had a fully working iPad, but used it exclusively as a coaster for her tea. So yeah, maybe Baghdad Battery really was a relic of forgotten science. Maybe ancient inventors dabbled in electricity, gave it a spin, and then civilization collapsed before it went mainstream. Like the Betamax of Mesopotamia, ahead of its time. Tragically buried under sand, politics, and general human nonsense. At the very least, it belongs on the shelf of, seriously, how did they build this? Right between Machu Picchu and that time the Romans invented concrete that lasts longer than your apartment lease. Let's talk about a phrase that academic types love to whip out like it's a get-out-of-conspiracy jail-free card. There's no evidence. Well, sure, there's no direct evidence the Baghdad Battery was used to power anything. No dusty instruction scroll, no plug-and-play Parthian toaster, no user review etched into a stone tablet saying, "Shock slightly, 3 stars, would not recommend on wet days." But here's the twist. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Think about it. Most ancient inventions didn't come with a receipt. We assume a lot based on fragments, literally. Imagine reconstructing the entire internet based on one smashed iPhone and a Wi-Fi router with a wasp nest inside. Good luck explaining TikTok to future archaeologists. And besides, we know ancient people were experimental. They observed, they tinkered, they made things. Just because they didn't leave behind a user manual doesn't mean they were clueless. They just had better things to do, like survive droughts, build empires, or invent goat-based currency systems. Also, how many times have we rediscovered things? Roman concrete, better than ours. Viking sunstones, actual GPS crystals. Indigenous people navigating the Pacific Ocean using stick charts and wave memory. Absolutely real, so maybe, just maybe, that weird clay jar was a battery. Maybe it powered something we'll never find. Or maybe it was just a cool science experiment from some Parthian genius who was like, "Check this out, I made lightning in a pot." And then history, like it always does, forgot. Because here's the real kicker, the longer we stare at artifacts like this and just say, "Nah, probably a coincidence," the more we risk missing the fact that our ancestors might have been a little smarter than we are. Alright, let's peel back the final layer of this electrified onion. Why are people so weirdly defensive about a 2,000-year-old jar maybe being a battery? Short answer, it messes with our timeline. And humans? Oh, we hate it when the timeline gets funky. We like our history like we like our IKEA bookshelves. Neatly stacked, color-coded, and definitely not short-circuiting in the desert. There's a comfort in believing that progress is a straight line. That ancient people were noble but clueless. That science marched forward like a polite British queue, orderly, progressive, predictable. But then the Baghdad Battery kicks down the chronological door with a big old surprise. And suddenly we have to consider that maybe, just maybe, our ancestors weren't adorable mud hut dwellers waiting for Einstein to rescue them from candlelight. Maybe they were inventive, curious, and occasionally brilliant in ways we don't fully grasp. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If we admit the Baghdad Battery was actually used for electricity, we have to start asking harder questions. Like, what else have we misunderstood? How much knowledge have we lost? And, are we the advanced ones, or just lucky recyclers of ancient ideas? It's way easier to call it a storage jar and move on. No paradigm shifts, no angry professors, just safe, sand-covered ignorance. But deep down, there's something thrilling, almost rebellious, about imagining ancient people zapping metal, plating jewelry, or shocking each other for spiritual kicks. Because if that's true, then the Baghdad Battery isn't just a curiosity. It's a reboot button. One that reminds us that history is full of wild ideas, lost tech, and the constant potential to be totally, gloriously wrong. And honestly, that's kind of electrifying.